Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Clamorous Caleb. We have way too many weird news stories to get to today. Some of them will have to be pushed off until tomorrow's podcast. We're going to start off by making fun of some government employees, including a libertarian presidential candidate who missed his rally after being bitten by a bat. There's another one. A congressional candidate was arrested last week, and he is still winning in the polls. So that's another fun one we'll get to. In the next segment, we're going to do my most absurd ones. That's where all my favorite stories are. Including a man who caught his wife cheating while searching through Google Maps. And my favorite story of the week, in which a cow is fought off by a helicopter after the cow attacked two other people. There's more to that story, so stay tuned for that. In the third god-dang segment, we're going to talk about some old fellas, including two 55-year-olds who got in a fight because they were playing Pokemon Go, and things got heated while they were playing. I like how the world is ending for so many people in 2020, but for these folks, their biggest problem is Pokemon Go. And then we're going to wrap up with my top 10. This week, my top 10 is going to be incredibly funny. It'll be my top 10 least inspirational quotes. There's a lot of them out there that are deserving of scrutiny, and I shall be the one to tear them limb from limb. We will get to that, but for now we're going to make fun of some government employees. And we're going to kick it off with a libertarian presidential candidate who got bitten by a bat and thus could not attend his rally. My mistake, I said he. This was actually a lady, Jo Jorgensen, who was intending to hold a campaign rally last Saturday in Jackson, Mississippi, until her plans changed. A little background on Miss Jorgensen. She's been an official member of the Libertarian Party since 1983. She found lots of success in her campaign this year and will be the Libertarians' nominee for president. She planned on touring all of Louisiana and Mississippi this weekend. I guess it's a pretty quick trip. However, her trip was cut short when she tweeted out, quote, "I will not be able to attend the campaign rally tomorrow morning. I will be getting a rabies vaccine as a precaution after having been bitten by a bat. I have every intention of participating in the Flame March, and I will deliver remarks at the #LetHerSpeak rally in Hattiesburg later in the afternoon." I like how she's more concerned with rabies than turning into a Dracula. That would be my primary concern. Also, wasn't COVID started by being bit by a bat? Or somebody bit a bat? I can't remember. Anyways, according to the CDC, bats are infected with rabies in every state in America, with the exception of Hawaii. And of course, without treatment, rabies is 100% fatal. And from what I understand, it is one of the most painful ways to die. That's what we'll do in my next episode. My top 10 ways to die. Should be tons of fun. Jorgensen expressed a sense of humor about the situation on Twitter, replying to one of her followers saying that she might have superpowers. When asked how this affected her campaign, Jorgensen said, "The U.S. cannot claim to be the land of the free when we send more people to incarceration than any other country." Maybe she didn't understand the question. Anyway, she went on to say, "All nonviolent victims of federal drug offenses should be pardoned. So either she didn't understand the very basic question, or she is going insane, or she thinks it's more important to stay on political subject rather than go off on a tangent about rabies. Unfortunately, none of this matters, as Jo Jorgensen still does not qualify to debate the other two major candidates, nor is she allowed on the ballots of 18 states. Not good. Okay. Next story, congressional candidate pleads not guilty. Meanwhile, he is still neck and neck in his congressional race. The man has accumulated 2 felony counts, including a domestic assault charge. Despite this, with about 80% of precincts reporting, the man still leads by about 5 votes. So it's quite unclear what will happen if he actually does win the primary election. Meanwhile, his criminal lawyer suggests that this is a bit of a conspiracy, saying, quote, "It is heck of a coincidence that suddenly charges are brought on the eve of the election on a case that the allegations are in excess of 3 years ago. It's not like he's been hiding or anything. If anything, he's been out every day working towards his campaign." So the offense he's referring to that occurred 3 years ago occurred on May 20th, 2017, when he was charged with second-degree strangulation. And he has since been released on a $5,000 bond. So he strangled somebody. And he was released for the price of a hot tub. So I think he's getting off pretty lightly, after strangling somebody. His criminal lawyer went on to say, "Obviously he's frustrated and puzzled as to why it was that this took 3 years for the complaint to apparently go to the police. One has to question the motives behind all of this." I like how he's more concerned with the prosecution's motive than he is with the fact that his client and possible future congressman strangled somebody. This is straight out of House of Cards. In the man's final statement, he said, quote, "Now I find myself in a position where I must put my family and our shared Republican values before my own interests," implying that his family and his Republican values are not in his own interest. He goes on to say, quote, "I cannot in good conscience move forward in this campaign while I am simultaneously forced to clear my name, and clear my name I will." And that's all, folks, for that story. Moving on to my next government employee tale. Police arrest an 8-year-old at his school, but his wrists were too small for the handcuffs. If you couldn't tell, this is my Florida story of the week. This young 8-year-old boy, he was both young and 8. Apologies for my pleonastic tautology. He was arrested for allegedly hitting his teacher. However, the weight of the situation deflated as the boy's wrists were too small for the handcuffs placed on them. So the boy was charged with felony battery, and you can go online and watch the body cam footage of his arrest, and it's kind of gross, actually. They make him put his hands against a wall, spread his legs, then they pat him down like, he could be carrying a weapon or something. They then put him in handcuffs, where he reportedly was sent to the police station. His fingerprints were taken, his mouth was swabbed for his DNA, and he has a mugshot now. The boy's mother has since filed a federal lawsuit, claiming that the city and school district violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, because the boy has special needs. He has ADHD. I don't know if that means you can get away with punching people. I don't think that argument's going to stand up in a court of law. However, my guess is they'll give it to the child just because he shouldn't have been arrested. He's 8. He punched somebody. It was stupid. Tell him not to. Punish him some other way than putting it on a permanent record. One of their legal representatives said, quote, "This is a heartbreaking example of how our educational and policing system train children to be criminals by treating them like criminals. If convicted, the child in this case would have been convicted of being a felon at just 8 years old and 3.5 feet tall. This little boy was failed by everyone who played a part in this horrific incident. So this incident all began when a teacher was supervising a class in the lunchroom when she pointed out to the student that he was not sitting properly on the bench seat. Apparently, she asked him to sit properly several times and then asked him to sit by her. He refused, and she got up and walked over to him. The teacher says that the student told her, quote, "Don't put your hands on me." And then he proceeded to curse her out, saying, quote, "My mom is going to beat your ass." And that was when he punched her in the chest with his right hand. When interviewed, one of the officers said he was postured as if he was ready to fight. It should be noted that the teacher did not receive any obvious injuries as a result of the attack. The attack by a 3.5-foot tall, 64-pound, 8-year-old boy. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave this story. It is most likely that his case will be thrown out, thankfully. If you want to look more into it, you can do so yourself. Alright, my next government worker story of the week is also my next Florida story of the week, in which a sheriff is banning masks for his 900-person department. He told the department last Monday that he wants his officers to ignore the CDC recommendations about PPE in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus. He says his mandate is meant to prevent stifled communication and identification when officers are interacting with citizens. In his defense, the sheriff said, quote, "We can debate and argue all day why or why not. The fact is, the amount of professionals that give the reason why we should, I can find the exact same amount of professionals that say why we shouldn't." He closed by saying, "Please keep in mind the entire pandemic is fluid and consistently changing the way things are done. However, my orders will be followed or my actions will be swift to address." So he's willing to punish on the basis of people wanting to wear masks. My guess is that there will be a bevy of lawsuits, especially if somebody ends up getting the disease. In fact, the city council plans to meet next Wednesday in order to override the man's decisions. In further defense of himself, the sheriff made some exceptions to the rule, being that officers working in schools, courts, jails, or hospitals will be allowed to wear PPE as they wish. However, when they are giving commands or orders, they are expected to remove the covering in order to speak clearly to citizens. This particular article goes on to say that the state of Florida leads in the total number of coronavirus-related deaths, peaking at 8,600 last Tuesday when measured, and they are second in total cases following Georgia. So I'd like to know what you guys think about this one. Leave a comment below. I'd love to see some political tetherball as you guys fight over whether or not we should wear masks if you are an official in the state of Florida. Okay, my final government employee story of the week. A Tennessee woman receives her license, but when the ID arrived, it only had a picture of a chair. So this occurred in Tennessee. A woman recently renewed her driver's license online. Don't worry, this will be a quick one. And the ID came back with a photo of an empty chair rather than one with her face on it. When asked about receiving the card, the woman said, quote, "I was with my mom and we were going to eat lunch and I said, 'You need to see this. This isn't right.'" The mistake is said to have originated as the DMV accidentally placed the empty photo in the young lady's file. The agency said, quote, "When the department was made aware of her situation, we immediately made things right with the customer and provided her with a license with her actual photo and have addressed the situation internally." So they're implying somebody got fired over this. Perhaps they're taking it a bit seriously. Personally, I would love a picture ID with a picture of a chair on it. Not only because I'd love to see a police officer's face when I handed it over after being pulled over to the side of the road for speeding. I think that would be quite funny. And quite worth the possible consequence of going to prison. Apparently, this young lady is taking the situation with humor, saying, quote, "My boss thinks it's funnier than anyone. I was at work Friday, and he pointed to a chair outside of his office door and was like, "I thought this was you. I waved at it this morning." So that's great. Nice levity and all this craziness coming from a screwed up ID. Okay, that's it for our government workers' stories. Next stories are my favorite ones. They're going to be the most absurd stories of the week, including a man who installed a life-size wax model of his dead wife in his new home, and a helicopter versus a cow who was attacking people. All that and more coming up in the next segment. Later on, we'll give you my top 10 inspirational quotes that aren't so inspirational. It'll be hilarious, so why don't you stay tuned, by God.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, the only place where you'll hear about a husband making a wax statue of his wife and putting it in his new house. We will get to that, as well as the cow that faced off against a god-dang helicopter, but for now we are going to start off with a lady who rode her horse to a bottle shop while drunk. This occurred in Queensland, and this lady has since been placed on probation. Earlier this month, she was arrested when she refused to leave the premises of a local tavern. She later blew more than 4 times over the legal limit for alcohol. And later last week, she tried to ride her horse through a drive-through bottle shop in order to buy more wine. However, she was drunk at the time, as previously mentioned, and as a result, she ended up in police custody. The 51-year-old was sentenced to 18 months probation with a conviction record. That's too bad. Although I guess having that on your resume will show employers that you are a person of, unwavering ambition. In her defense, she believes that she was not breaking the law by riding her horse Skippy after drinking, simply because she's done it many times before. She says, quote, "Not only have I ridden my horse through the quite busy streets, and I have never been refused service. I've never been refused service on my horse at the pub either." She is a self-confessed alcoholic and is regularly attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, as she told the courts last week. And in a beautifully sweet statement, she said, "It's a very serious thing for me. It's cost me a lot of grief and heartache in my life, and I just want to move forward. I'll be complying with everything they want me to do, and basically, they just want me to get help, which is what I am already doing." So this beautiful story has a beautiful ending, as well as being completely absurd. Alright, a man installs a life-size wax model of his dead wife for his housewarming. This elderly gentleman is an Indian businessman, and unfortunately his wife was killed in a car wreck 3 years ago. However, it is said that he refused to let his image of her die, as he paid to have a hyper-realistic wax figure cast in her likeness. It is said that the figure is actually strikingly lifelike, despite the fact that its eyes are stuck and the face is forever smiling into the distance. The businessman also built his new house with her in mind and dedicating it to her memory. The man then held a housewarming party where he introduced his wife's new life-size statue to his guests. Oh my gosh, that must have been so creepy. This sounds like a Curb Your Enthusiasm plot. The woman was dressed eloquently in a pink sari and a gold accessory, which decorated both her neck and her wrists. It is said that she was positioned on the living room couch, and that she left many attendees speechless, which you can see as footage was taken of the event, and it is quite hilarious to watch. Unfortunately, I cannot tell what they are saying, although I'm sure it is hilarious. Alright, next absurd story. Lawyers for Kanye West are arguing that his signatures from Mickey Mouse and Bernie Sanders should be accepted on his nomination papers in order to qualify him for the presidential ballot in Wisconsin. They are also arguing that if these signatures are not accepted, they must be proven fake. Otherwise, it is a crime to not accept them. So this all began when one lawyer back in November submitted a 23-page response to the Wisconsin Elections Commission saying that technical challenges over West's signatures were, quote, misguided and ill-informed. So basically the Wisconsin Elections Commission is looking for evidence that this is actually Mickey Mouse's signature that Mr. Kanye West is boasting about in order to qualify to run for president. And Mr. Kanye West is now asking his lawyers to, quote, give clear and convincing evidence that the signatures are real before they can be stricken from the nomination papers. His lawyer said, quote, a complainant cannot simply raise an issue with little or no evidence and shift the burden to the candidate to prove validity, which is what complainant attempts to do in this situation. As such, and purported challenges with no little supporting evidence should be dismissed. This conflict grew and grew, and now the nomination commission is seeking to strike 299 signatures from Mr. West's campaign application. They go on to say that 4 of the signatures appear to be fake, including Mr. Sanders, Mickey Mouse's, and 2 that are from Kanye West himself. Oh my gosh, what a disaster. The aforementioned complainant said several signatures signed the nomination papers were obviously fake. It is impossible to verify whether somebody who provides a fake name is an elector who is eligible to sign a candidate's nomination papers. Therefore, all such signatures must be stricken. Mr. Kanye West's lawyer went on to say that the complaints against the signatures and the timing of their delivery were part of an organized effort by the Democratic Party and its wealthy allies. That fear of the candidacy of Mr. West would destroy their party. He went on to say, quote, the Kanye West campaign represents a uniting, inspiring, and faith-based vision that is successfully motivating disenfranchised and previously unengaged voters to participate in the political process. People of color have long been marginalized in this country. In seeking to remove Kanye West from the ballot and silence the voices of those who signed to place him, the complainants are continuing this marginalization simply because Mr. West's views and perspectives on issues do not conform with theirs and those of the party they represent. So this is getting properly heated, as all campaign issues end up being. I personally hope Mr. West gets to run, as I don't think he'll win, and it will be incredibly entertaining, especially if he ends up on a debate stage with some of the other how shall we say, characters in this election. Alright, next story. A husband discovers that his wife is having an affair after spotting her in the act on Google Maps. The husband was searching through Google Maps when he recognized his wife getting cozy with another man on a bench nearby, and when he confronted her with the image of her getting cozy, she admitted to having an affair. Now, of course, this is sort of heartbreaking, but it's also, it's kind of funny. First of all, I'm glad that this lady got caught in the act. She should have been caught. She shouldn't have done it in the first place. And now she has to deal with the fact that the image went viral on Facebook last week. The images in question display the woman with her head being laid on the lap of her quote-unquote lover. The face of the man is obscured, unfortunately. I don't think it's too unfortunate, although it would make the story juicier. And the woman's face is also blurred out, as it is the standard practice on Google Maps to protect people's privacy. Right. I do find it amazing that this man could recognize his wife even though her face was blurred. It shows that this man actually cared about her a lot, which is kind of a sad thing. We can only hope that this conflict is solved in time. All right. 2 people were evacuated by helicopter after a hostile cow attack. The helicopter also scared off the cow. So this occurred in California, whence a California Highway Police helicopter rescued an elderly couple who were injured last Saturday while trying to flee from an angry cow. The elderly couple encountered the cow and her calf while hiking in Lynch Canyon Regional Park. The cow apparently found them to be a threat and began chasing them, causing them to fall and hurt themselves. It is said that when the helicopter arrived, it was just in time, as the couple was on the trail laying down and the menacing livestock was just a few feet away. The chopper hovered down and shooed the cow off by sounding its helicopter siren. I didn't know helicopters had a siren. That's great. That way all the other helicopters can get out of the way when they're speeding. I don't know. The man and woman were hoisted one by one about 75 feet into the chopper and then flown to a waiting ambulance crew at the trailhead. They were taken to a hospital and treated for injuries, and it should be said that firefighters and a medical ambulance were aiding in the rescue. I like how it took firefighters, an ambulance, and a helicopter in order to fight off a cow. I guess it's one of those things. You always hear about how cows kill more people per year than sharks. So maybe it's time to start petitioning against cows. Perhaps make a few movies that scare the bejesus out of people that include cows attacking children and whatnot. I think that has a just cause. But perhaps that's just my young, idealistic mind getting to me. Alright, speaking of cows, painting eyes on the butts of cattle can protect them from lions, research shows. The researchers begin by saying that the predation of livestock by carnivores and the retaliatory killing of carnivores as a result is a major global conservation challenge. So these nature scientists have a problem with the circle of life. Nevertheless, they have a solution, where in this study they describe how painting eyes on the backsides of livestock can protect them from attacks. Quote, big cats, including lions, leopards, and tigers, are ambush predators. This means that they rely on striking their prey and retaining the element of surprise. In some cases, being seen by their prey can lead them to abandon the hunt, and eyes painted on the back of said prey qualifies as being seen by said prey. And they actually ended up testing whether or not they could hack into this circle of life loophole and reduce the cases of livestock losses to lions and leopards. Their initial focus study involved them simply following herds of cattle waiting for large cats to attack in order to see how and when and why lions and tigers attacked. They then painted eyes on the butts of the livestock, and their study found that lions were less likely to attack cattle if they had eyes painted on their butts. They boast that this is a simple and cost-effective technique that can be added to the coexistence toolbox where ambush predators are involved. I don't think they understand that predators cannot coexist with prey, because if they do quote-unquote coexist, they will die of starvation. They can't just start eating plants, unfortunately. There cannot be any vegan lions, as far as I know. Leave me a comment if you think I'm wrong. Anyways, it goes on to say in this article that the study ended up inspiring local herders to paint their cattle. In fact, 14 different herds followed the instructions and actually had similar results to the study. They said that in order to prove that it worked, they only painted 1/3 of each herd with the artificial eyes. And then they painted another third with cross marks instead of eyes, and left the remaining 1/3 unmarked. After several years, they concluded the study, finding that every single one of the 683 painted eye cows survived throughout the entire course of the study. 15 of the unpainted cows and 4 of the cross-painted cows were killed. Now, the best part of this article, and I can't tell whether or not they're being serious, but I'm going to go ahead and assume they are, because people are just out of their minds these days. They are wondering if this applies to humans. So if humans were to paint eyes on their butts, maybe predators, human predators, would not look at butts anymore. And wouldn't that just be fantastic? Perhaps there is a study to be made there. I see a future Florida story of the week in this study. But unfortunately, we have to wait until somebody is ambitious enough to come up with it. Alright, that's it for my craziest stories of the week. I actually have a couple more. Maybe we'll get to them after I finish everything else in my third segment. My third segment is going to involve a bunch of old people, including 2 55-year-olds who got in a fight over a Pokemon Go competition. And then later in the fourth section, I'll go into my top 10 least inspirational quotes. Stay tuned for that.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Let's get into some weird news stories about old people. Starting with a 103-year-old Michigan woman who celebrates her birthday by getting a tattoo. Holy Lord. Okay, so this this comes to us after the lady was spending months in isolation during the coronavirus lockdown. She was actually one of the people who was old enough to be in a nursing home. She's 103, I guess she's old enough for anything. Her name is Dorothy Palak, and she celebrated her birthday in June, saying that she finally got to check off one of her last bucket list items. Apparently she was struggling mentally as a result of the lockdowns. Her granddaughter said, quote, COVID-19 had her in prison for months, referring to the nursing home lockdown. Only a week after being discharged, this grandmother decided that she wanted a tattoo. She got one, and it was a frog. The grandmother said frogs are one of the things she loves more than beer and burgers, which is a great reference to go to when describing something you love. Apparently, she took the tattoo like a champ. The tattoo artist said he didn't see her flinch once, saying that she took the needle better than anyone he has ever seen. After the tattoo, the old lady said that she absolutely loves it, and she ended up crossing a second thing off her list that same day with a motorcycle ride. So she went from 0 at the nursing house to 100 at the tattoo parlor and the motorcycle store. You know, the store where you buy motorcycles. Okay, our second old person story. And this is when a 56-year-old got arrested for assaulting a 55-year-old over Pokemon Go. This happened on August 10th in the great island nation of Japan. As previously stated, police arrested a man on suspicion of assaulting a 55-year-old acquaintance who was seated inside his compact car. The man is accused of grabbing the other man through his car window, damaging his side view mirror after kicking it. Their dispute began after they were playing the smartphone game Pokemon Go. Apparently both men were competing for control of the same gym. I don't know what that means. I never got into Pokemon. But apparently they were fighting over control for the same gym with their respective collections of monsters. I think that's the Pokemon, right? When things got heated between the two of them, the altercation escalated. Apparently, this was also the result of growing tensions for a long period of time, as both men have admitted to knowing each other for at least a few years after meeting through the game itself. The police put out a statement saying that they are not sure of the exact cause, but Pokemon Go is never a good reason to inflict violence on another person, and most online condemned attack as well as the overall behavior of these upper middle-aged men is completely irresponsible. The police went on to say that these two men are too old for this kind of altercation, and they need to learn some humility. Alright, final old person story. The U.S. government has proposed changing the definition of a showerhead in order to allow increased water flow, following complaints from the president about his hair routine. So don't worry, I'll keep politics out of this as much as possible. But apparently under a 1992 law, showerheads in the U.S. are not allowed to produce more than 2.5 gallons of water per minute. The current administration argues that this limit should apply to each nozzle rather than the overall fixture, essentially doubling the 2.5 gallon limit. Of course, this whole debacle arose as a result of consumer and conservationist groups that argue that it is wasteful and unnecessary. Now, as a freedom-loving American, I find it is my right to be as wasteful and unnecessary as I wish. Not only that, I believe it's an American tradition to be wasteful and unnecessary, and I don't think it should be legislated. Perhaps it should be looked upon with social disgust. But personally, I don't think you should make any laws against it. First of all, once you put laws into place, that means that somebody can get arrested for it. Just think about it. Do you really want your neighbor to be arrested because his showerhead used more than 2.5 gallons of water per minute or whatever it is? Seems like this should be a social consequence issue rather than a federal consequence issue. Nevertheless, that's my take. Tell me in the comments why I'm wrong. Anyways, these changes were proposed by the Department of Energy last Wednesday following complaints by the president at the White House last month, when the president said, quote, "So showerheads, you take a shower, the water doesn't come out. You want to wash your hands, the water doesn't come out. So what do? You just stand there longer. Or you take a shower longer? Because my hair, I don't know about you, but it has to be perfect. Perfect!" So he actually doesn't take my position that this should be a freedom argument. He's arguing that this should be a conservation argument, which I think is the wrong approach to the situation, but perhaps it will win him the showerheads he so desires. In response, the executive director of the energy conservation group Appliance Standards Awareness Project, goodness gracious, that is one heck of an acronym, said that the proposal was, quote, silly. He went on to say that with 4 or 5 or more nozzles, you could have 10, 15 gallons per minute powering out of the showerhead, literally probably washing you out of the bathroom. If the president needs more help finding a good shower, we can point him to some great consumer websites that help you identify a good showerhead that provides a dense soak and a good shower. Showerheads in the U.S. already achieve high levels of customer satisfaction while saving people money. So I obviously think this whole argument's ridiculous. But I'm glad to learn where my tax dollars are going to be spent. Alright, next story. We are all out of old people stories, unfortunately. So let's get into some cool science stories. They're really aren't that weird. They're just interesting. I like them. Alright, reverse waterfalls discovered in Australia. So, of course, the name does not imply what you think it implies. It actually applies to water running off a cliff and then quickly being blown back up it, making it look like the waterfalls are going backwards. You can go online and take a look from an aerial position of the phenomenon, and it blew up on Twitter last week. It is fairly gorgeous. You see the steam going over the cliff and then quickly being blown back up it and becoming sort of a cloud as it blows over the savannah. Quite beautiful. I suggest you look it up if you want to be happy this week. The event is getting many travelers from Australia itself, they can't let people in from outside Australia, to visit the location in order to see the gravity-defying mists. One of them said, quote, the apocalypse is so much prettier than I imagined. They say that although the site is pretty, they do not recommend people go and see it, as it involves you getting close to a cliff where winds reach about 45 miles per hour in order to create the phenomenon. Believe it or not, going near a cliff when it's windy is not safe practice. Alright, next science-y story. This one is more nature versus science. And guess who won? I bet it's not too hard to guess. A bald eagle shows air superiority by destroying a drone and sending it into a lake. So the ironic thing is that the drone was actually being manned by the Michigan Department of Environment. And apparently this bald eagle has some qualms with that fact, as he flew into the drone, ripped off a propeller, and threw it into Lake Michigan. The attack occurred on July 21st. The drone was supposed to be mapping out a shoreline in order to determine the erosion patterns near Michigan's Upper Peninsula. According to the quality analyst and the drone pilot, he had completed about 7 minutes of the mapping flight when the satellite reception became spotty. He, as a result, pressed a button to return the $1,000 drone to him and was looking at the video screen when the drone began to twirl. He said, quote, "It was like a really bad roller coaster ride." He apparently looked up and saw the eagle flying away, apparently unhurt by its confrontation with the drone. Apparently 2 bird watchers nearby also saw the bird attack, and they told officials they didn't realize it was a drone, but they thought that it was funny either way. I like bird watchers. They actually have a great sense of humor. I guess you have to in order to watch birds. Otherwise you would get kind of dull. Apparently the drone sent out 27 different warning notifications in the 3.5 seconds that it took to spiral into the Lake Michigan, including one that noted that a propeller was missing. Isn't that sad? The death of technology and progress as we know it. Unfortunately, a search from the shoreline failed to find the drone. Data eventually revealed that it landed 4 feet deep in the water, about 150 feet offshore. The drone team is now going over what can be done to possibly reduce a repeat attack. Some of these suggestions include using skins on the drone in order to make it look less like seagulls, as they think that that was the cause of the eagle flying into the drone in the first place. Maybe take a note from our earlier story, paint some eyes on the back of it, or make it look like a tiger. I don't know. If I was an eagle, I'd be pretty scared of a flying tiger. But then again, I'm no scientist. Alright, next story. Horses are starving in Morocco as tourism collapses. This one's sad. This one is a call to action from me, folks. Apparently, this starvation epidemic began as one tourism guide said that he had to sell one of his horses for just $150 in order to just help feed the others. It is said that he is still, quote, scared about the future for the other horses. He goes on to say that, quote, the prospect of starvation looms for carriage horses and other animals normally used in Morocco's tourist mecca, since visitors have vanished during the coronavirus pandemic. According to the Society of Protection of Animals Abroad, Morocco's carriage horses and donkeys are threatened to the tunes of hundreds or even thousands as tourism collapse. Beyond that, they go on to say that these horses provide livelihoods for thousands of people in the area. God dang, this is a sad story. One of the tourist guides said, quote, if you have a shop, you can close it. If you sell goods, you can store them. But imagine having horses who need to eat, drink, and get medical care. I think that's a false equivalency. If you have a shop, you usually have to pay loans on it, you have to pay bills on it, you have to pay taxes on it. So I think it's actually quite similar. The only difference is stores don't starve, unless you're talking about economics, but that's beyond me. After having to sell 7 different horses in July in order to feed his family, one of the tourist guides said, quote, "This is not something I can easily forgive myself for." So this is an incredibly tragic story. It goes on and on. You can go online and find places where you can donate to these nice folks in order to keep their horses from starving to death. So please feel free to do so. But for now, I'm going to move on to my last weird news story of the week before I get into my top 10 least inspirational quotes. And this is a pretty basic one. It's more of just a fun little tip for you guys. AMC is selling movie tickets for 15 cents now. This will only be on August 20th, and the available movies will be Ghostbusters, Black Panther, Back to the Future, and Grease. If you're not willing to pay 15 cents to see Olivia Newton-John dancing around, then I don't know what you would pay 15 cents for. There are, of course, many concerns with this prospect, as people expect that 15-cent tickets will draw in massive crowds of people, spreading the virus. But AMC says that they already have precautions in place. Tickets will be limited, seating will be spaced out more, unless people are from similar parties. They're boasting that movies in the 2020s are being sold at 1920s prices. So that's the angle they're taking, a historical one, which is beautiful, I think. I think this world would be a much better one if all movie tickets were 15 cents. I remember when they had that god-dang movie card, I don't remember what it's called, Movie Pass. And that's basically what movies cost when you have a Movie Pass. But it turns out people don't make any money when they sell their product for 15 cents, so they quickly went out of business. Hopefully the same will not be said for AMC. But who knows, movie theaters have been struggling for a while, and perhaps this is all they need to cut their profits by 1,000%. Okay. Stay tuned to our next segment, where I'll give you my top 10 least inspirational quotes. It's going to be hard to talk a long time about each quote, so perhaps I'll give you more than just 10 in order to fill out the time. Stay tuned for that.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. This is our fourth final segment. We're going to do my top 10 least inspirational quotes. Starting with, you guessed it, number 10. Push yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. I like this one a lot because it implies that it's a problem that nobody is going to push you. I take things literally. And so the prospect of having to push yourself so that nobody else is going to push you around is quite entertaining to myself. Perhaps they should change it around and call it push yourself, just in case somebody else wants to push you too. 'Cause that's inspirational. You don't want to get pushed around, do you, by God? Alright, number 9. You are going to want to give up. Don't. So usually motivational quotes are supposed to provide some sense of guidance. And unfortunately, the only advice coming from this one is don't. It also actually disincentivizes you by saying that life is gonna suck. You're going to want to give up. And its only argument against that is don't. Hey, you ever feel like giving up? Well, have you tried not giving up? I mean, I guess they're technically correct that is a solution to the problem. However, I find it is deeply misguided. I think one of the funnier things about analyzing all these quotes is imagining what somebody would say to themselves if they were actually taking these quotes seriously. You know, perhaps somebody eventually does want to give up. So they look for solutions and end up finding this one. And then they just keep telling themselves, don't. It just seems like that would make you more and more paranoid. Either way, this is just not a great motivational quote whatsoever. Alright, number 8. 3 months from now, you will thank yourself. Now, in the age of the internet, 3 months from now is an eternity, right? I mean, we can get anything we want basically within 2 days, thanks to Amazon and similar websites. But according to this motivational quote, you have to wait 3 months in order just to thank yourself. Not to mention, you probably shouldn't be thanking yourself for anything. Whatever you do to yourself should be said by the act and the result of said thing done to yourself. So this motivational quote has plenty of holes in it. Alright, number 7. We are going through these way too quickly. I don't want to keep you guys waiting, though. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. And this, number 7, is one I hear a lot. It's, quote, "'Cause working out feels so much better than sitting around all day." Now, I don't know if you guys have ever worked out or not, but from my experience, it's basically just pain over pain over pain, right? I mean, the actual science behind working out is that in order to grow your muscles, you have to tear them apart, which by definition does not feel good. And frankly, it feels a lot better just sitting around all day, right? With electronics, you basically can have dopamine just streamed into your brain 24/7. You don't need the goddamn gym. So I think it's fair to argue that this is not a great motivational quote whatsoever. Perhaps a better one would be, "'Cause working out feels so much better than dying." I think that's more accurate than working out is worse than sitting around all day. Alright, number 6. This one is possibly the worst out of the bunch, but I think there are a few more that can have a deeper analysis done on them, so I'm going to save those for later. Number 6, expect nothing and you'll never be disappointed. So, yeah, this one pretty much says everything for itself. It is literally suggesting that you should not expect anything, you should not have hope, you should not have faith, you should not look forward to anything, because then you will never be disappointed. This one's especially sad because I found it on a relationships website. Expect nothing and you will never be disappointed. So they're giving these out to people who are disappointed constantly in their love life. It's just so depressing. And I can actually see the argument for this quote making sense. It's just framed improperly. It should say something like, "Get over your disappointment if you have expectations." To me, that's a much better motivating quote. Because you should have expectations. You should judge other people. And if you're disappointed, you're disappointed. That last thing I said didn't make a whole lot of sense. We're going to move on. Number 5. Only dead fish go with the flow. There's a lot of scientific problems with this one. Specifically that fish almost always go with the flow. I think it is kind of funny on its own right. Speaking about how dead fish go with the flow. Nevertheless, it is scientifically inaccurate and also kind of emotionally inaccurate. As going with the flow is a great way to avoid unnecessary stress. This actually conflicts with many of the other quotes we've already reviewed. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot more I can say on that one. Number 4. Alright, miracles always happen when you believe. So, I know I'm starting to come off like a cynical jerk. As I told you from day one, that is my MO. However, I don't think it's useful to tell people that miracles will happen if they simply believe. I've always found the idea that belief in something makes it real is just a silly one. But perhaps I'm wrong. Leave me a comment and let me know if you think I am wrong. Alright, number 3. Why be moody when you can shake your booty? So this one's not a very inspirational quote, as you can tell immediately. I just think it's funny that I googled, searched inspirational quotes, and this one came up. Which means that somewhere around the world somebody has tagged it as being their motivation in life. To be fair, don't knock it till you try it, and I have yet to try shaking my booty whenever I am moody. However, I will be sure to try it next time. Number 2, start where you are. I don't have to say too much about this one, but it makes me laugh every time I read it. I kind of want to put it on my wall just to motivate my own self, because it makes me laugh. Start where you are. Where else would you start? This is probably the most useless motivational quote you could ever find. And if anybody ever tells you it as their peak motivational quote, you should probably avoid that person at all costs. Also, if you need to be told that you need to start where you are, then you're in trouble. Alright, number 1. I feel kind of bad. We only went through about 7 minutes of my top 10 this week. There's just not an easy way to stretch all these out. But I believe it was all worth it for number 1. Your only limit is you. I like this one because it implies that everybody's a loser. If you read it with the cynical tone that I read everything in. It's just kind of a constant reminder that everything that happens to you that's bad is your own fault. Your only limit is you. Just a constant reminder that the reason you're a failure is because you're not good enough. Alright, we only went 8 minutes, so I have to find something else to talk about for 7 minutes now. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you now my top 10 wittiest quotes. Let's pick a person, too, so that way we don't, have to pick from every single quote ever made. Let's pick Oscar Wilde. He's a smart fella. Alright, number 10. These are in no particular order, by the way. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. This one I find to be extraordinarily true. Even though I don't have a whole lot of enemies, just looking back on history, as well as in television, nothing seems to invoke pain on your enemies so much as being nice to them in general, not just forgiving them. You can see this in TV, whereas usually the most annoying villains are those who pretend to be nice. So not only do I think that true, I also think it is witty. Number 9. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. So this one's funny, especially if you grew up in a Catholic household like I did. For those who don't know the saints are people who usually died for their beliefs, and as a result they didn't have a future. So this quote is basically just saying that, it's kind of a good thing to have a future. Even if it's at the cost of morality, you will have more opportunities for morality in the future. I actually disagree with that, but it is an interesting one to analyze, and it is also quite funny as well. Number 8, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Now, I normally hate quotes that say be yourself. I find them quite susceptible to my cynical outlook on life. I don't think you should just be yourself. I think you should always be striving to be a better person. But simply saying that you should be yourself because everybody else is already taken is specifically saying you shouldn't try to act like other people, which I think is true, but it's also important to learn from other people. So, much like Oscar Wilde's other quotes, they are not completely true. However, of course, they are witty. Number 7. A cynic is a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So I love this one because I am a cynic. And it's absolutely true. We always look at the darkest side of things. The difference is, as a cynic, I usually find the darkest things to be the funniest. As perhaps you can tell over the time you've spent with me over the past month or so in these podcasts. However, I do believe this is one of the few that Oscar Wilde says that is almost completely true. Number 6, fashion is a form of ugliness so intolerable that we have to alter it every 6 months. I think this is particularly true in the internet age. Not just speaking on fashion, but trends in general. And of course, it's completely true. Most trends out there are just awful, just horrible. Every single one of them is looked back upon with disgust. Just think about popular songs today. In a year or so, you'll hate them. Think of the popular songs from a year ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. They're absolutely despised, usually. So I think this one holds true, even in the modern times, if not more true. Alright, number 5. The world is a stage, and the play is badly cast. I have nothing to say about that one. Number 4. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. I disagree with the first part of this. I think the truth is pretty pure. Of course, it's true that it's never simple. That's the problem we have today, is you have people on all sides saying that they have scientific evidence of both of their positions, even though their positions are polar opposite. So I think this one can be taken into modern consideration by showing you that you should delve deep into issues you care about. Because if there are 2 studies taken that are completely conflicting, guess what? One of them is wrong. And it's your job to find out which one is wrong, rather than just arguing on which study is the correct one, because you will never win that argument unless you know the facts and the backgrounds in each study. Sorry to get a bit preachy there, but now we're going on to number 3. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. I also disagree with this one. Anybody who's ever watched the Oscars, you know, that, or maybe it was the Grammys with that lady dressed in all meat, you can be overdressed. Apparently that was seen as some beautiful statement on the cow slaughtering, and I don't know. But it is of my opinion that you can be overdressed, right? A lady dressed in just pure diamonds would be really odd to look at. Also, I've met plenty of people who were overeducated, as previously stated. They believed in studies that had no background in reality. However, of course, there are plenty of intellectuals who know what they're talking about, who should be taken seriously, but only after being scrutinized by your own review of them. I think it's fair to say that both the smartest and dumbest people I know are the most educated people I know, and I side with Mark Twain on that position. I believe Mark Twain's quote was, "You can either be uneducated or miseducated." Another good one he had was, "I would never let my schooling interfere with my education." So it's always good to learn stuff and also scrutinize everything you learn and make sure that it is the truth, which is pretty easy in the age of information, but also fairly complicated, as we've learned over the past few minutes. Alright, number 2. Some cause happiness wherever they go, others whenever they go. I think that one speaks for itself. We will move on to number 1. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives a mimercy, and their passions a quotation. So obviously I agree with this one, as I know my life is copied from lots of other people. So I can personally attest that this one is true. Perhaps there are people out there who are not, but that is all for this week, so we cannot dive in any deeper. I will thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe so that you get the most up-to-date weird news. I will also ask that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I will see you tomorrow.